Aloha, and thank you all for attending my presentation. My name is Bill Morrison, and my talk is entitled Masking Pixels: Insights into the Design and Delivery of a Photoshop Workshop. In the next 25 minutes or so, I'll describe the instructional design project I undertook. I'll start by providing you with some project context. I'll then offer some highlights of what I did, some details of what I found, and finally, what I plan to change next time around. At the end of the presentation, I'll offer you the opportunity to ask questions, and I'll post a link to my project, which is available online. So let me begin by providing you with some project context. There are some key players that help facilitate this project. First, there's the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where I've been a student, employee, or student/employee since the summer of 1994. Within the university, there are two groups which have had a significant and positive impact on my life in recent years. First is the Department of Educational Technology, or ETech, where I'm currently a master's degree candidate, and second is Pacific New Media, or PNM, where I work as a software instructor. Of the key players just mentioned, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Pacific New Media. PNM is part of the university's Outreach College, which provides continuing education opportunities to the general public. PNM's particular educational focus is on technology. One of the main forms of instruction provided by Pacific New Media are live workshops featuring software contained in the Adobe Creative Suite. So for those of you unfamiliar with the suite, you might recognize these software titles: Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Dreamweaver. These are all rich, robust, industry-standard applications. The vast majority of those who attend PNM software workshops are adult learners. Most are driven by professional needs to acquire software skills, either for a job they currently possess or for one that they're seeking. Other attendees are there for more personal reasons, for example, digital photography hobbyists looking to improve their Photoshop skills. PNM workshops are fee-based. They cost money to attend. All workshops are evaluated, namely, attendees are offered the chance to provide feedback on the workshop's quality. And finally, PNM workshops are non-credit. So unlike K-12 or formal higher ed, there are no enforceable homework assignments, testing, or grading. To help you visualize, this is the Pacific New Media Computer Lab, where software training takes place, and where I teach. The lab features 20 student computers and an instructor workstation. The instructor faces the students, presenting content on the overhead screen. Software instruction is typically a mix of instructor-led exercises, skill demonstrations, lecture, and discussion. Now back to the key players previously mentioned. It was really the enthusiastic support and guidance provided by both ETech and Pacific New Media that led me to focus my project on the design, delivery, and evaluation of a software training workshop. And because neither group offered any restrictions on what software I could design for, I decided to go with the one I enjoy teaching the most, Adobe Photoshop. Now Photoshop is an enormous program, so I decided to focus my instructional attention on a particular Photoshop subskill: masking. Masking is a slightly abstract process of hiding pixels, and it's a vital skill for Photoshop users to acquire. For the workshop's target audience, I decided to design for the typical PNM adult learner. I also chose to aim instruction at Photoshop masking beginners. I felt that a 3-hour workshop would provide enough time to adequately present the topic, and rather than attempting to pry my research into a normal, fee-based PNM workshop, I decided to offer it for free in exchange for attendee research participation. Now let me switch gears slightly from providing you with project context to offering you highlights of the workshop design and delivery process. The first major thing I did was get topic smart. As a daily Photoshop user, I possessed a strong working knowledge of masking, but this knowledge certainly had some gaps. To fill in these gaps, I consulted various professional resources on the topic, including numerous books and video series. A little home study converted my working knowledge into a teaching knowledge. Home study got me to a point where I believed I could begin producing quality instruction, and to a point where I felt confident that I'd be able to troubleshoot and field questions accurately during the upcoming live workshop. Also noteworthy in this knowledge acquisition process was the fact that while reviewing these professional resources, I picked up on numerous examples and non-examples of how other professional Photoshop instructors approach teaching the topic of masking. Exposure to these good and bad examples would help shape my design efforts. So there I was, topic smart, with lots of ideas on how to teach the subject. It was time to begin designing the workshop. This is what the prospect of creating 3 hours of Photoshop masking instruction first looked like to me, an enormous, intimidating gorilla. This wasn't because I felt 3 hours was a lot of time to fill, but rather because I had days worth of possible masking instruction floating around in my head. While Photoshop is enormous, so is the topic of masking. So how did I begin making friends with this intimidating topic? The first thing I did was focus in on the needs of my intended target audience. Because I chose to design for Photoshop masking beginners, I felt it would be appropriate to pull out and present a handful of fundamental masking skills. Would these core skills provide complete coverage of the entire topic? Nope, and I was totally okay with that, because not only would complete coverage take far more than 3 hours to present, it would also need to include advanced content inappropriate for my beginner-level learners. So, with my focus set on delivering the fundamentals of masking, I set out and designed my workshop. I developed 5 exercises designed to span the 3-hour workshop timeframe. The exercises were to be presented as instructor-led, step-by-step explorations into masking fundamentals. I also put considerable effort into making each exercise as fun, real-world, and practical as possible. And with workshop design completed, it was time to recruit an audience. I sent email invitations to a group of my former PNM students and to some eTech classmates with whom I was taking a visual design class at the time. I invited both these groups because I felt they would likely fit my target audience of Photoshop masking beginners. The invitation was met with enthusiasm, and I received attendee confirmations from members of both groups and, surprisingly, some coworkers of former PNM students. And with a suitable audience set to attend, it was then time to deliver. In early January of this year, I delivered my workshop 3 separate times, twice on Saturday, January 7th, with 8 attendees in each session, and once again the following morning with 7 attendees, bringing the total participant count to 23. No major delivery issues arose in any session, and overall, I was very pleased. You might notice that each session is listed as being 4 hours long, so let me explain why. I've discussed 2 of the 3 main components of my project, workshop design and delivery. Remaining is an explanation of how I evaluated the workshop. I evaluated by analyzing data collected through surveys and tests administered during the workshop sessions. To be more specific, in the 30 minutes prior to the commencement of workshop instruction, I administered a pre-survey and a pre-test. Immediately following instruction, I administered a post-test, and finally, a post-survey. As I was able to successfully administer both surveys and tests, a variety of useful qualitative and quantitative data was gathered. The pre-survey yielded various details about the workshop attendees. The pre-test measured what attendees knew before instruction. The post-test measured what they knew after instruction. And finally, the post-survey yielded a variety of feedback on what attendees thought of the workshop. Now once again, let me switch gears slightly from providing you with highlights of what I did to describing what I found through the analysis of survey and test data. My 13-question pre-survey was designed to gather a variety of demographic and technology experience data from workshop attendees. Responses to one question provided some reassurance that I had recruited a suitable workshop audience. The question specifically asked, "What's your Photoshop experience level?" In response, 83% of attendees reported beginner, which was my target audience, and 17% intermediate. Related and noteworthy is the fact that one attendee reported they had never used Photoshop before. While the workshop was not designed for first-time or intermediate users, these non-target workshop attendees performed well and appeared to have appreciated the workshop's content. So what did I find through workshop testing? My pre- and post-tests were 25 questions covering general Photoshop and masking-specific content. Concerning grades, the average participant pre-test score was 71% or a C-, while the average post-test score was 85% or B. Concerning pre- to post-test trends, 74% of participants scored higher on the post-test, 13% showed no gain, and 13% scored lower. My reaction to the analysis of workshop test data was a mix of surprise, sadness, and concern. I consider the class grade shift of C- to B less than optimal, C- to A being way more desirable. I also consider the no gains and losses in knowledge to be entirely unacceptable. So I went back and took a deep look at the test to see where students seemed to have struggled. In doing so, I've come to the conclusion that rather than there being major issues with the instruction itself, it was really my inexperience in designing test questions and a lack of final test question refinement which caused the less than optimal and unacceptable test results. This project was my first attempt at software test design, and I could use some more practice. My post-test was designed to ask attendees, in a broad sense, what did you think of the workshop? And in order to gather a range of attitudinal feedback, I posed a handful of questions in a couple different formats. First, I used 4-point Likert scales to elicit feedback on my instructor performance, the workshop's learning environment, and the personal learning experiences that attendees had. Overall, Likert scale findings were very positive and reassuring, and of note, while attendees appeared to have been particularly pleased with my topic knowledge and encouragement of active participation, I did notice a slight dip in satisfaction concerning the workshop's pace, exercise difficulty, and an attendee confidence regarding the realities of unsupervised post-workshop skill use. In other words, not all students left the workshop feeling confident that they would be able to perform masking skills on their own at home. Also included in the post-survey were open-ended questions designed to gather qualitative feedback. These attendee comments, in addition to helping validate the Likert scale findings, supported some of the workshop design choices I'd made, as shown in the top comment. Attendee feedback also served as a much appreciated pat on the back, as shown in the middle comment. And attendee feedback also offered valuable constructive criticism, things for me to think about, as shown in the bottom comment. Now I'd like to shift gears one last time from providing you with details of what I found to telling you about what I'll change. First, let me note that the original finite scope of this project was to design, deliver, and evaluate a software training workshop, and I hope I've adequately presented these key project components to you. But if the original project ended with a critical evaluation of my own design and delivery efforts, why am I planning to make actual changes to the workshop, and what might these changes be? Let me start with the why. My Photoshop masking workshop has been added to the formal Pacific New Media Summer 2012 software training program. Now I won't lie, this is really what I was hoping for all along. Specifically, last summer, my last year of school was approaching, and I was thinking, I wonder if I can do a master's degree final project that turns into income after I graduate. So mission complete. Of course, it's not all about income. I really do enjoy teaching. I also teach a full-day beginner's guide to Photoshop, and I've never had a follow-up class for it. Now I do, and that's fantastic. So, while the original project scope ended at the evaluation stage, I'll now use the insights gained through the evaluation process to make educated adjustments to the workshop before redelivery on June 3rd. And what possible adjustments might I make? Well, the original workshop, delivered 3 times in early January, consisted of 5 exercises. And the exercises were designed to fill the workshop from beginning to end with structured, instructor-led, follow-the-leader content. With this design style, I set minimal time aside for in-class practice. My design rationale? As a Photoshop instructor, targeting beginners, my primary job is really to expose students to the software's capabilities, to show them cool and useful stuff, in hopes of getting them to use Photoshop, and in turn, get good at Photoshop. In other words, I gotta get them to drive so they can get good at driving. And honestly, I still think this is a valid design approach, but it might have some limitations. As found, this design style can leave some students feeling less than confident as they walk out the door. So, the adjusted workshop might look more like this. Rather than stringing exercises together, back to back, I might walk the class through exercise 1, then allow for some practice time. Perhaps by having them repeat the exercise on their own, or by challenging them with a similar exercise. Note that with this scenario, which is designed to increase student confidence, something has to give. If I take time out of the workshop to allow students to practice, I have to subtract time out of exposing students to the software's capabilities. Does this mean that I throw 2 exercises away? No way. I can just assign them as optional and unenforceable homework assignments. And while I do provide detailed exercise documentation, I might also develop exercise screencasts to help students complete the homework. So, in the end, I think the magic workshop, for me, lies somewhere between this scenario, with its focus on exposure, and this scenario, with its mix of exposure and practice. Honestly, prior to undertaking this project, I really didn't even consider this scenario. Now I do. So I feel I've grown as an educator, and with that said, I'd like to thank you all for attending, and thanks to all those involved in this effort. I'll now post a link to my project, give you some time to check it out, and I'll turn off my mic and offer you the opportunity to ask questions.